It's 8:20. Well, it's nearly 21 minutes past, actually. Let's go from tech to books, the other end of the spectrum, because a big new neuroscientific study into what book clubs do for us is being launched. It's being commissioned by the Queen's Reading Room charity, which started back as an Instagram book club in lockdown. And it will look at the physiological and the psychological effects of not just reading, but shared reading in groups and how that's different for us. It's going to be led by Professor Sam Wass from the University of East London. Good morning.
Morning, Anna.
I'm curious about how you test for something like this.
Yeah, so there's lots of different ways that we test in terms of kind of brain activity and kind of bodily activity, which we'll get to in a second. But just to start with kind of the neuroscience of why there is a lot of evidence now that kind of reading is relaxing. So previous research by the Queen's Reading Room has shown that even short bursts of reading can reduce stress and improve concentration. And we're trying to kind of uncover some of the brain mechanisms for why that is. So basically, there are big differences between how our brains process information when we're reading compared with screens. So our brain's a prediction machine. So word by word, as I'm speaking, your brain is guessing what's going to come next. And when we're consuming information from screens, we have a lot of information coming at us very fast. So auditory and visual information. And it's often pitched by the designers at a level where it's a struggle for our brains to keep up. So this is exciting, but it puts our bodies into high alert mode. You know, we're getting bombarded with a lot of information and we're trying to process it all really, really fast and on the fly. And when we consume information through reading, it's very, very different in a couple of ways. So firstly, the information that's actually coming at us is kind of low bandwidth. It's very, very simple. It's just black shapes on a white page. And what our brains do is we kind of self-generate information. So we build on top of that kind of very low bandwidth information that's coming in. So we imagine sights and sounds and smells based on the words that we read. But because from a brain perspective, this is information that the brain itself has generated, it doesn't kind of take us by surprise. It doesn't kind of challenge our brains in the same way. And the second key thing that's really key when you're in control of reading is that you're in control of the pacing. So if you think, how you'll move as you're reading, so you'll read a couple of words and then you'll glance away and then you'll look back. And that's your brain, controlling the pace that the information comes at you. And it only takes in new information when you're ready for it. So those are a couple of reasons why we think, all of the evidence shows, and it's really good evidence, that reading does have this amazing effect of promoting calmness and relaxation.
Cariad Lloyd's with us as well, the co-host of the Weirdos Book Club podcast. Morning, Cariad.
Good morning.
What do you? And I'm really curious because I've never done book club stuff. Although, like you, I did do English literature, so I'm sort of a bit used to having conversations about it. But what's the difference when you're reading something collectively and when you're talking about it? How do you sort of describe the different things it does to you, the different way it feels?
Well, yeah, so our podcast, we just choose a book each week and then we have a comedian or a writer come on and talk about it with myself and comedian Sarah Pascoe. And I think it's just a really joyful experience. As we all know, if you've gone to see a film with a friend or, watched, like you've just been talking about The Traitors, it's kind of group experience, and being able to come back to people you love or people who are interesting and funny and say, what did you think of that bit? Why did they say that? Or I was so moved when that happened. And to have that group experience, I think as humans, it's just so important for us to be able to come back and connect with other people.
Yeah, sometimes you do just want to tell someone, oh, guess what happened? Or I really enjoyed that. Or how did that make you feel? And it's great to have that feeling yourself, but to actually pick it apart with somebody else is quite joyful.
Yeah, and if you think this is, as your amazing expert was saying, there's so many sources of information these days, and often we don't have those sort of, moments where other people have read the same books as us or seen the same films, watched the same television. So it's quite rare these days. And I think that's why book clubs are so brilliant, why our podcast is so much fun to do, is that like us and the listeners might be reading the same book, or they might not have read it, but they want to hear about it. And to have that group experience where you can come together and have those moments in books which where you really think, my goodness, I've got to talk to someone about why that character did that or how she said no to that person. It's part of the enjoyment of reading, even though reading by yourself is also hugely enjoyable. I think making what seems like a solitary pursuit a group pursuit afterward is really satisfying.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, isn't it, Sam, that as Cariad was saying there, we're talking about doing it with books, but actually you can do it with all sorts of things. Just that feeling of having somebody else to bounce off is a big part of it.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the angles that we're looking at in this research with the Queen's Reading Room and the Bentley Foundation is about the role of kind of books and book groups in helping people to recover from trauma. So the Queen's Reading Room does a lot of work kind of funding book groups with people like the Elm Foundation and St Mungo's. And, this is area where, what Cariad's been talking about is really, really important. And again, there's a really good evidence base that kind of book groups and shared reading is very effective for helping people to recover from trauma. And we're looking at why. And, it comes back to this idea that I was talking about, a lot of information coming at us. So often when we've had trauma, the after effects of trauma are very kind of high intensity and out of control. So kind of we get flashbacks, which tend to be very perceptually driven, and they're very visual and they're very auditory, and they're isolating. They take you away from other people into, your own world. And when we're reading, we get this incredibly close glance into, the inner world of the character. But as I was saying, it's all this very low bandwidth. It's very controlled how we take this information in. We're imagining, so it's self-generated brain activity, and stories are structured with a beginning, a middle and an end. And the process of discussing in a book group is very controlled too. So there are lots of reasons, I think, why, for coping with this, very out of control feeling of trauma, book groups are a really, really kind of effective way to help people to cope.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you so much for joining us. It'll be fascinating to see what the results of that study are. Professors Sam Wass and Cariad Lloyd.
It's 27 minutes